Okay.
Yes. So anything that enters a quotation mark is basically a string. It could be a number, it could be a letter, it could be anything. It's a string. It could be dot dot dot. It takes that as a string, and it just outputs that. If it could be a word, a name, winner. That's a string. It could be winner is going to be 100 years old sometime. Now, that is also a string. Now, you can now deal with those strings in several ways, in several different ways, but that's the basic first thing is that is a string object. Now, to other basic things, before I go to the main gist, I think, of what that chapter 11 was trying to do, is that you could have, for example, if I had, say, for example, if I said A equals and this links with something we were doing with functions in the past, where you could define so you could prompt somebody to answer a question, and then using the answer to the question, you connect it to an overall response. So for example, what day is it? And then they tell you the day, and then you output, well, the weather on this, insert their answer is this, that kind of a thing. So A could be that kind of a thing. You just collect a string and stores it in as a variable. For example, if I said A was a University of Birmingham, and I say that B equals um, School of Engineering, then I could, for example, I could form a string which is like so. I could say winner school is studying at plus A plus, no, well, I mean, so you it's funny because also this space is also a string. So you add that to format your thing properly. So you add a space there, A plus another space in there, and then plus, and I want to say, so winner is studying at the university. Okay, I want to put the here, at the university, at the, okay, A, okay, space, at the space A, University of Birmingham, plus, and then I want to put something else here, comma, University of Birmingham in the space, and I want to add B. So one could do that like that. And I could then say, actually, I want this to be equal to C. And this is where today's main thing. So if I say print C, winner is studying at the University of Birmingham in the School of Engineering. Right. So now what chapter 11 now is all about is that I could take C, and C has so there are ways in which you can format string objects. So if I put a dot, for example, hopefully this works. I'm sure it should work. If I put dot upper, hmm, built-in method of string. And if I say print D, okay, so why is it doing that? Winner and B equals university. Okay, so I say C equals A plus B. So I should be able to have, in fact, this is also interesting because you can have C equals A plus B dot, for example, and you can change change the whole thing. So for example, and just make that up, if I were to run that, so I want to run, what's this file? Hello.py. Okay. So is this hello one? No, this is hello.py. So what's this one? Okay, I'm just gonna run from here. Okay, it's hello one. Okay. So why is it running? I want it to run. Okay, okay. Okay, so I have to tell it to print C. So let me run that now. Okay, that's when I invested. That's the response. In fact, let me just do a new Python file. Just let's see. Okay, so okay, so that goes like so. So if I run lesson, it comes up with that, and we can see obviously immediately how not putting a space in between has caused the problem. So if I run it again, now it has put the space there. And so this is where the really important thing is. Now, all this dot upper, if you put a dot, it comes up with all forms of formatting that you could have, that you could do. And some of them are more useful depending on what you want to do. Depending on what you want to do. So you could also have capitalized. And if I had to run that, it will come up with that. It just capitalizes the first. That was capitalized does. It capitalizes the first letter in the word. There are other things that there. You could have you can have all sorts of things. Let me see another one that can be interesting. Okay, there's a swap case one there, and that one just basically so it changes it gives the opposite of the current case that is there. So the university obviously can, as we can see there, just changes. So these are things that one could use depending on what you want to have in there. The other thing that I also saw and I noticed, but I was still trying to think what the main point is really, is that if you had, for example, if I said that L equals the numbers that won the lottery 2 days ago are, and so one could do something like this. Now, I really, I don't understand what this thing is, right? And you can have, for example, say, let's say that let's say y equals 48 and x equals 46. Right, and you can have that, you can have dot format, and you just put y comma x. And so it basically, it just, so this thing, these two things are basically telling the string operative or operator that these spaces are to be kept. They are to be kept not unoccupied. They're to get unoccupied, but to be filled. And so this format function or extension here is what tells it what it fills it with. And so the number of arguments that you have in the format must correspond to the number of curly brackets that you have opened and closed in there. And so that does that for you. So if I run that, it should tell me something. And I have to tell it print hell. This print L, okay. So it tells me now that the numbers, oh, I think it showed it before actually. The numbers that won the lottery 2 days ago are 48 and 46. Now it tells me that. Now my main thing is, I think, I don't know, because obviously I could have just written the numbers that won the lottery 2 days ago are 46 and 48. You can just put and here and run it and have exactly the same thing. Or let me just put this into a print function. So it's pretty much the same thing. You can achieve the same thing by doing that. But anyway, as I'm thinking about it now, I just realized, well, it can be useful in the sense that instead of putting that inside of the string function or string operator, you can have this as a variable caller, so that just puts it inside it at the right. And so I'm guessing it's going to be useful when you're dealing with like lots and lots of text with specific points where you are putting something in. So for example, if you had a text that was describing somebody's life, and so you first state their age, and so that's the first curly bracket, maybe the house number, second curly bracket, how many children they have, and so everything is stated in a very formulaic way within that text, then that makes sense to have that dot format. Other than that, I can't really personally think of how else that thing can be useful. And then
especially when the value is not stable. So the value to be input is being computed. It's not like the value has already been known.
yeah,
The
yeah,
value
yeah,
coming from, and to
from
very,
like
you are not sure of what the value will be, but you
yeah,
want the output to report whatever is
that
being
value is.
out.
That makes sense. So for example, this could be like at the end of a function where you have written a code to do a particular task, and then you say the print no answer equals the number of iterations needed are, and then you put a curly bracket dot format, and then in here would be the number of iterations that you needed from that particular operation that you were doing, or that particular thing. Okay, yeah, so that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, okay, that makes sense now. Okay, that makes sense. So that's useful in that. That's very useful in that sense. And the last other one is something that completely replaces all of this, that can do all of these things, all of this dot format that we can do, is the F string, which is basically so you have F dash and then you put in your text. The boys are here, and there's something else I'm missing, I'm sure. Something else that I'm missing. Okay, there's nothing missing. Okay, so you can have F. Okay. What am I missing with this F? Okay, it's like you use it as part of this, for example, a part of within a function or within a thing inside, and it calls it automatically. So instead of having to go outside of the string to do a dot format and then call a variable, this one can do that here. And just by putting in that curly bracket, you can call that variable. In this case, for example, it's number of arguments, which is 3 here, and it just calls it in here just because of that F thing. And similarly, you can do other things. You can change the uppercase, lowercase, all of these things using the same method. So what else? Yeah, that for me, I think that does the string objects part.
Thank you. So just continue from what we're already familiar with, that we're already aware of functions that are already built into what we call it, into Python itself, that we have always been calling, and like print, input, integer, float, list, slides, length, and some of the string string functions that we have made mention of. So I when it comes to writing and reading, is also part of the built-in function in Python. And the function are just to be called, and they will carry out what is expected from them. So we have basically the file object, that is the open function, which if we want to open a particular thing, we give the file object, and then we call the file name and also the mode of what it should do. The mode depends on what we want, whether it should be read or it should write it. So we have different forms of modes. So we have, if by the time I call a particular file name and ask for R, which I'm asking it to read, W to write, A to append, which is to add to it, and R plus is to, if the file exists, it doesn't need to create it. But if it does not exist, it should write the file and read whatever I'm trying to put into the file into that. So the function, when it comes to this, it comes into play. For instance, I use an instance of a particular, let's say, an app that we can easily develop. So there's no need to say one is starting it from the beginning, but I will just show the illustration of such kind of app. The essence of the app is to give a particular data to allow the users to input the data, and when you input the data, the file's name, we want the whatever to read it, and after reading it, to read certain lines from the files, and that's after reading the lines from the files to close that particular file. So in this case, we see, for instance, now that based on that illustration, that we start by saying file name is equal to input enter, which we're trying to create a kind of input thing for the user, and then the in file, what it should do, you should open that file and read it, and then create a particular data set which we interrogate. And from what I have here, if I clear this particular what do we call it, if I clear the output, I have to test run it before coming to illustrate. So let me just clear the output, and start and clear output. So the database that we are taking is a database of weather, the weather temperature, which was obtained from the website that reads the weather every day, and it reads and what we intended to do, we wanted to, is not just after collecting the data, what it should do to it. So we look at it, get data from so line, locate the lower temperature, the higher temperature, the rainfall, do the splitting, as we have talked about, the splitting of the particular string that it has received, and then put the data into a particular list, into this particular list format. We will understand better when, for instance, I run this. So let me run this. So we say, what's the file name? Now, in getting the file name, you actually need to put the file, that you have to put it in a particular location on the system where you know the directory, so that you can be able to interrogate with the file. So for instance, now if I type copied temp.cv, I'm running this particular script from the same location, which I call in my what do we call it? I call it inside my document. I put it inside what we say Python exercises. So I already put that what we call it, that file, which is I called copy temp.csv. So they are together. So when I call, I don't need to put document / it already knows that it's the same directory
that you are working in.
So when I put it into it, it's now identify that, and it's now asking a question based on what I've already said. It will interrogate or question the database. So we can see, like now, it has access to that particular spreadsheet, and it has splitted the major things that are inside of the spreadsheet. Because when you open the spreadsheet, what I have is a tabular form of day, month, and year, and so what it did at the end of the day is it asked for these inputs, for the date you care about, enter the what we call it, the month, and so my task now is to enter the month for the date I care about, and it also asks that what we call it, that for the what do we call it, for the date you care about, enter, and then it also asks for the day.
For the day.
For the day. Now, it's one has to understand anyway ahead, because there are some limitation. Because if you just put January, if the spreadsheet is not shaped in such a way that maybe I used 1 or I used JN for January, if someone put that may not be able, it may not be able to read that. And then if I put the full January, maybe it will be able to say it's identify that. But if we ask, there are some other validation that one still needs to do.
Yeah, definitely.
That, in order to fine tune. So let's say, for instance, we said I enter the month of, I just say 01. So let me say the month. So because it's not, I know that I formatted the spreadsheet on
One
month
stop.
level as general one, not, and then the day I care about, let me say
Okay,
for
so you have to put 01, not
yeah,
not one.
01, because I did not spread it. If I give you the spreadsheet, you realize I didn't put January. So I did the date by dates of 01, 02, 2000, and then the weather reading of each of them. So if I
Okay.
set for that, it will now be able to say, okay, there were one day, the lowest temperature on record for that day is this, the highest temperature on record was 60, and this. So if I share, if let me share the entire what do we call it, script, as well as the what we call it with you, the script as well as the spreadsheet, then we'll be able to also interrogate what we have been able to do there. Um, but before then, okay, let me just share that used in the work. Let's say the like what I used here, which I try to trace the location that whatever, since the file that is being used in my own directory is on chapter 12 of whatever. So RT, which is and then ask it to open it and give the instructions what you should do with it. And this way, for me, I believe that with the four instructions, able to say, okay, give space, script this one, remove these, and do this with this, close the file, and do this when whatever is done, and is able to say, okay, all this have been done. But when I open that particular file that it has created, um, I will find the content of what is written. So it's the same thing as the examples that is this is where the text is. So most times I extract just the text alone and do some cleanup, because what I'm more interested in would be, and it's still those other instructions. So the part of other instructions that are inside the right are part of the things that can actually help someone to do some cleanups. So let me use the example of what I retrieve now from what we call it, from that D column, which is the tweets people are having on what we call it on NSAS. So now I can now begin to use this to operate on this. And most times, like when all this idea of a library, dictionary, and all those things comes to mind at this point, because I begin to look at it that, oh, if it, for instance, is having some of them as already uh, in certain format and whatever. If I want to split, if I want to remove part of it, if I want to do all other operation that comes into play, that is what one now begin to carry out with the with all not have this error again. So if I say R plus and then this thing, no find such file in that directory. Okay, let me write it first. Okay, and now let me go to the directory um, and check the name I've given to that is the name I gave to that my data file. So my data file. So I want to open. There's nothing inside. and I'll move from there after writing that particular um, file. I'll move from there to declare, let's say, two variables. Volume 1 as 50 and volume 2 as 100. So out file dot write. Um, out file, I want it to be the same as what I've just created.
Okay. Okay.
So let me add that so that if I say out file dot write, the volume of these, so there's the, the first volume is the string that we have there, and then the out file, the second volume is this. I want to check what will happen to there's a mix up here now. What the goal I want to achieve with this illustration.